Okay, so round two of the 2025 NRL season has just concluded. Some really interesting results. A couple of teams still remain unbeaten, some surprises in there, some blowout scores, and some concerning results already for some teams that are already struggling to start the season. Now, this round, no one scored 50 points, unlike in the last round where two teams scored 50 points. No 50-point scores this week. The Knights 26-12 over the Dolphins. Really good performance by the Knights. They'd stepped up a level from their win over the Tigers round one. Dolphins, a lot of concerns there for the Dolphins already for Christian Wolf. In the post-Wayne Bennett era, two really average performances, not good. They've lost their first two games to start the season. And this was going to be the year they took that step forward, but they're 0-2 to start the season. Some concerns going into the match against the West Tigers next week, where they are at home. So it'll be interesting to see how they do at home against the West Tigers. It has been a bit of a disrupted first couple of weeks of the season because of the cyclone, but they're going to be at home, and let's see what they do against the Tigers at home in Brisbane. The Knights, however, really solid start to the season, and this could be the year they take that next step and reach the top four, for example, and challenge. The Warriors 36, Sea Eagles 16. This was a surprising result, but then when you watch the game, the Sea Eagles were not at their best. The Warriors, massive improvement from round one in Vegas, where they were absolutely dreadful. They were on song here. They had taken that week off and really put whatever into practice because the attack just clicked. They had more energy, and the Sea Eagles just didn't quite look at the races in this game, which was surprising considering their result in round one. So, a bit interesting that they win one, lose one. The Warriors have definitely got over their Vegas hangover with a positive win, and it was a good response from the Warriors. So I do think the Warriors, if they can get that attack to click consistently, I think they can be quite dangerous this season and can bounce back. I do. I honestly, the way they handle the Sea Eagles, I think if they can get that attack to click week in, week out, be consistent, and keep key players fit, I think they could actually have a bounce back season. Last year could have been an aberration. The Panthers Roosters, this was the shock result, possibly the game of the round. The Panthers scored 32, the Roosters scored 38. So the Roosters bouncing back from that humbling by Brisbane. They were really poor last week. This week, they stayed in the fight. They have a lot of injuries. The Panthers were just not at their best. Dylan Edwards is a concern for an injury going forward as well. Did not complete the game. The Roosters, that was an important win for the Roosters because if they had lost this game, there would have been a lot of question marks over their season. I still think they're going to be not as strong this season overall, but bouncing back from that really bad defeat shows some good character. A lot of inexperienced young players in the starting 17, and to win away from home against the Panthers, that is a statement win by the Roosters to show that was week one against Brisbane just a one-off, or were Brisbane that good? But we'll talk about Brisbane in a bit. The Panthers looking human, which gives a lot of hope to the rest of the competition. They were not at their best. The Roosters just threw everything at this game and deserved to win as well. Dragons losing to the Rabbitohs 24-25. The Dragons had this game in the bag. And they blew it. The Bunnies, who would have thought they would be unbeaten to start the season considering how last year went, and they are still missing key players as well. They are still missing key players, but this is a Wayne Bennett coach side, and he is a players coach. He's a man manager. He can get the best out of players. He can be tough on some, fatherly with others. He gets the best out of players, and players want to play for him. That is a fact. The Dragons, they blew that from a winning position, and the Dragons are 0-2 to start the season. The Bunnies are 2-0 to start the season. But it was a close game. The Dragons just got things wrong with their game management, and trying to shut the game out. They're going to be frustrated with the two losses they've had to start the season. The Bunnies, they've won two close games, which last year they would have lost those games. So that's already showing some improvement. They still have some way to go to compete with some of the better sides in the competition. But to be 2-0 to start, that is morale boosting. And I think the Bunnies are going to be difficult to break down for even better sides. They're going to scrap for everything. They're going to be competitive for everything. The Cowboys losing again against the Sharks, 12 points to 36. Again, a bounce-back win for the Sharks following that close defeat to the Panthers. I think that gap is closing with Penrith and Melbourne and the rest. The Sharks, that was a very good performance by the Sharks. Cowboys, worrying signs up in Townsville. That's 2 defeats to start the season, 2 bad defeats to start the season. There are some concerns here. They are really struggling. I think this could be a long season for Cowboys fans. They need to find some improvement somewhere. The Sharks, that was a solid performance. Was it their best? No, it wasn't their best, but it was a good bounce back from that close defeat to the Panthers in Vegas. And normally you have that Vegas hangover. Last year, the 2 sides that lost did not make the top 8. The 2 sides that won in Vegas did make the top 8. And what is interesting, only one side remains unbeaten from the Vegas weekend, and that is the Raiders, who beat the Broncos 32 points to 22. Now, I had concerns for the Raiders going into this, and I am a Raiders fan with Joey Tarpany and Xavier Savage being out suspended. I thought we've lost some strikeout in the outside backs, and we've lost our captain and forward leader. The Broncos were poor. The Raiders, while they started to look a little bit wobbly towards the end, the Broncos were still in the game. They hadn't quite put the Broncos to bed. The Broncos was week 1, just a flash in the pan, or is week 2 where actually the Broncos actually are? Because much like the Sea Eagles, great week 1, not so great week 2. The Raiders, I think people are underestimating the Raiders, and that's another morale boosting win. They had a good win in Vegas. They've had a good win at home against what is tipped to be a top 4 side in the Broncos, unbeaten to start the season. And the energy and commitment and the fitness of the players. Ricky Stewart has said this is the fittest group of players he's ever worked with. The off-season apparently has gone really, really well. Is it the strongest Raiders squad we've ever seen? Probably not. But they're willing to play for each other. The energy levels are really, really good. The Broncos just didn't look like the Broncos of week 1. There were some vulnerabilities there. They just didn't quite look settled in this game. Has a lot of the positive press gone to their heads? Have they got ahead of themselves? You've got to slowly build a season, and they just didn't turn up. We'll see how the Broncos respond next week. The Eels, West Tigers. The Eels are in serious trouble. Wooden Spoon is screaming out from the Eels here. They scored 6 points. The West Tigers scored 32. I think the West Tigers will be all right this season under Benji Marshall. I think this is an improvement season. That's the best I've seen the Tigers play in some time. And they were close in round 1. They could be 2-0. They narrowly lost to the Knights in round 1. They could be 2-0, not 1-1. The Tigers, this could have been more. Honestly, the Tigers butchered a couple of tries, and that's again a new combination in the halves. Some inexperienced young players, a very youthful squad, some new combinations, as I say. But the Eels are terrible, and this is not all down just to Mitchell Moses being absent. You cannot put the Eels' 2 performances to start the season on Mitchell Moses not being in the side. This is a team, and Jason Riles, under a lot of pressure after just 2 weeks. They have been abysmal. They have been absolutely abysmal. This has got to be the worst start to an Eels season that I can remember. And they've had some bad seasons. They've had some good seasons, but they've had some bad seasons. But they are in serious trouble. Already, I think the pressure is building on Jason Riles and this team and this organisation to turn things around. And they've got a pretty handy Bulldogs side coming up in round 3. So they're in deep trouble. Parramatta fans were leaving after about 50 minutes. They were streaming out of Combank Stadium. They were streaming out the stadium, and it was very noticeable that the team were flat. Already there, I think there's concerns. I think the Eels might get the wooden spoon already. They've not shown anything in a creative sense. They look very passive defensively, and you have to ask the questions about the appointment of Jason Riles as head coach and what the direction of the team is taking. They did have a poor season last season, but it's been a very quick collapse from grand finalists to narrowly avoiding the wooden spoon last year to being 0-2 to start the season and looking pretty inept. The Bulldogs 40, Titans 24. The Bulldogs, great start to the season. This is, I think, the first time they've had back-to-back wins to start the season in over 13 years. Titans, good in flashes, but you could definitely see there was having that bye in the first week may not have suited them. And of course, they've had all that disruption with the cyclone that hit the Gold Coast, Brisbane, and northern New South Wales, where they've been forced to relocate to Sydney for training purposes. That's clearly disrupted them a little bit. The Bulldogs, though, some concerns. Kickow and Burton coming off with MCL injuries will be a concern, but they've had a brilliant start to the season. Much better performance than round one. I thought they played better than round one. They really kept the Titans at arm's length. They blitzed them in the first half. I do think the Bulldogs need to manage their game management a bit better. It has been very, very warm to start the season, like high 30s degrees Celsius. They did look like they're just not quite managed their energy levels. But the Bulldogs, I think they are the real deal. I don't think last season was a one-off. Cameron Serraldo's really got them playing, and they have been fun to watch. And scoring 40 points, that was one of the weaknesses of the Bulldogs, was their attack wasn't the best. They had a brilliant defence, but that attack has started to show up in these first two games, so they're starting to score more points than they did last year already. So that is a positive to look at. So there we go. There is the round 2 review. Melbourne Storm had the bye. We'll look at a preview in the next video for next week's games. But that was a fun round 2. I mean, admittedly, the Eels, I think, for me, are the team in the most trouble. They really are in trouble. The Dolphins have had a poor start as well. The Cowboys is another team that I'm concerned about. The Titans have only played one game, so we can't really take that as much. But surprises, the Bunnies and the Knights being unbeaten, and the Raiders starting the season unbeaten as well. A bit of a surprise to start the season. The Roosters against the Panthers was possibly one of the best games as a neutral you'll watch. And the Panthers look human. They did look human, and the Roosters, great bounce back from a really poor opening round defeat to the Broncos. So already the NRL's looking quite open this season. There's a couple of surprise packages in there, and already there's a couple of teams, Cowboys, Eels, for example, that are already showing real concerning signs, and the Dolphins going into round 3. I think round 3 there's a must win for those three teams. But for me for now, thank you very much for watching. Place your thoughts on the second round of the season in the comment section below, and I'll have some more content for you guys very, very soon.